This is the most RGB of a PC that money can buy. Why did I waste $2,700? I think in all of my years building computers, this has got to be the worst value proposition I've ever made. I mean, yeah, sure, you've got nice lights, you've got an RGB radiator with a cool screen, but the power simply isn't just there to justify $2,700. For that kind of money, you'd expect a lot more power. Now, all of this here costed me a grand total of $2,672. Yeah, you heard me right. $2,672. Let's quickly go over the heart of the build, the GPU and the CPU. For the CPU, we've chosen this bad boy right here, the i5-14400F. For $200, it's honestly not that bad at all. Normally you'd see me like fanboying the older generation like the 12400, but in this thing, you actually get some serious upgrades. It has 10 cores, 6 of which are P cores and 4 of which are E cores. Not to mention they're overclockable up to 4.7 gigahertz. And unlike the i9 brothers it has, it's not a flaming ball of fire, which means you can use its tiny little stock cooler here or any reasonably cheap $30 to $40 air cooler, but we're not doing that in this video. We're going overkill. And for the GPU, we've chosen the Galaxy RTX 4060. Now, why the specific model? Well, specifically, it has 2 RGB fans, which are controllable not only through the computer, but also through an app on your smartphone, which is gonna be super interesting to try out. Not only that though, it's also white, which will match the theme of our build really well. Now, we managed to get this one for around $300, which honestly, the 4060 for $300 or under is a really good deal. I'd easily recommend it, and you could probably find it for around $250, $260 on Amazon, but just because this specific one is that RGB and white one we were looking for, we got it for MSRP, which was $300. Now, pairing these two together, the i5-14400 and the RTX 4060 is a really good matchup. They have zero bottleneck when you're gaming, which means that the CPU and GPU are being used to their max potential. But also you can make a reasonably powerful, not reasonably, a really powerful build for around like $800 to $900 with these two components being the heart of your build. The thing is though, this build was not $800 to $900. It was $2,700. And in no universe would you see me recommending an i5 and a 4060 for $2,700. So what makes this build so expensive? These guys take the cake, costing us a total of $458 for 10 RGB fans and a radiator. If you've been following along with the PC community, then you'll know a lot about these guys. They're all the hype these days, especially when it comes to enthusiast builds. Now, what makes them so unique is their daisy chain locking mechanism. Think of Legos and how the different pieces will just snap together. These fans will do the same. You can slide them in together, lock them in place, and that removes the need of having multiple cables for RGB control and power coming out of each fan. Now you can just have like a group of 3 fans locked together and no cables except the one coming out of the whole group, which is honestly a lifesaver when it comes to cable management. Gone are the days of 10 plus different wires in the mess in the back, and it's just, ugh. Are they worth it though? Well, they retail for around $40 on Amazon if you were to buy one fan, just like this one right here, one fan. And to that, I say no. If you're gonna dish out $100 to $150 on some fancy RGB fans, then by all means, go for it. But you could get the same kind of look from some cheaper $20, $30 to $15 even RGB fans, and all you're losing is that daisy chain mechanism. So some cable management is fine. However, if money is not an issue, I cannot lie. These fans are pretty lit. Get it? Especially in this case. Oh man, this thing's heavy. Oops, hit the fridge. This is the Lianli O11D Evo RGB. It costed us around $160 on Amazon, which honestly, for an enthusiast case is not that bad at all. Me personally, I'd choose this over something like an NZXT H9 Pro Flow or a Height Y60. connecting everything together, the very fabric of our build, the motherboard. We've gone with the ASUS ROG Maximus Z790 Formula. Wow, that was a lot. How much did this motherboard cost again?
$750. $750.
$750. I'm gonna try my best to justify this decision. Well, we've chosen it because it's, if I show the back here, it's white. It has a lot of these white heat sinks covering the majority of the board. It has some RGB lighting here spelled out in ROG. But not only that, one thing that ASUS ROG is known for is their RGB software, the Aura Sync software, which is one of the best softwares out there right now in terms of being the most efficient with CPU usage and memory usage. So choosing this one was a no-brainer because we didn't want to, tax our components just to run all of our RGB. And finally, it has a ton of Aura RGB sync headers that we're able to connect all of our components to and not stress out about not having enough connectors on the motherboard. Still, $750. Just try not to think that hard about getting the same performance for $600 less. Now you know what is overkill? The RGB Delta Max Lite 512 gigabyte from T-Force. Why on earth anybody would buy an RGB SSD, SATA SSD, is beyond me. Because not only are SATA SSDs usually hidden in the back compartment of your PC, but honestly, it's just a stupid idea. Like I think it looks pretty ugly and you're paying a premium for it. $50 for 512 gigabytes, and it's not even like a fast M.2 drive. That is simply not worth it, but hey, RGB, right? Of course, we had to go with the good old Corsair RGB Vengeance. Vengeance? I don't even know how to say it, but these good old sticks costed us around $255. We decided to go with 64 gigabytes total of memory, 6,000 megahertz, which is honestly pretty fast and pretty reasonable. We decided to get the white one to match the aesthetic of our case, and it has that RGB liner on top, which will add to that overkill RGB look that we're going for. 64 gigabytes as well, so pretty good performance. Not that bad at all. And powering everything is this 850 watt gold rated power supply from GameMax. Now, why we've chosen this is pretty simple. It's white and it has RGB, and that's the whole goal of the build. The RGB is controllable through a sync header that we're gonna use on our motherboard. It's priced at around $92, which honestly is not that bad at all, especially in comparison to some of our other builds. Motherboard, Infinity fans. But this is gonna do the job. It's gonna power all of our RGB components, gonna power all of the main components. And honestly, one thing is for sure, why would you buy a RGB power supply? I mean, who's gonna see it if it's in the back of the case, right? That's just my personal opinion though. And to top it all off, we've gone with not one, but two streamer RGB cables from Lian Li, costing us around a total of $120. Yeah, $100+ for two cables. The cost of RGB in the modern age, right? What these will do is add that RGB aesthetic to our overkill RGB PC because they have full controllable RGB effects running across the entire length of the build. And though they are expensive, I can say that they might be worth it. I could totally see myself rocking one of these in a personal build just because they're so unique. And just to be honest, normal power cables are kind of boring. Now that we've got everything out of their boxes, let's get building. So one thing I've noticed about this Lian Li 011 is how modular everything is. Like you can take pieces apart and install them outside of the case. It seems like, well, both of them are the same company, the fans and the case. Seems like they tailor-made this just to make the installation that much easier. Now I can just screw in the fans outside onto this piece of metal and just slide it back into the case, which I think is super convenient because if we come around here, to the underside. In any regular PC chassis, you would just screw the fans in from the underside of the case. But when you're working with Lee & Lee and their overkill products, this is the great kind of quality and innovation that you see. So these are going to serve as our exhaust fans. So they're gonna be taking all of the hot air out of the system. Just a quick tip for you guys when you're building your computers, put your exhaust fans at the top and the rear of the build. Because if you think about basic properties of heat and like hot air and cold air, hot air rises. So if you have your exhaust fans at the top, you're abusing that natural property to where the hot air is gonna rise towards your exhaust fans, making your overall system cooling efficiency a whole lot better. And also putting your intake fans like here at the bottom, think about that. You're sucking in all that cold air that's at a lower level below your computer. So just keep that in mind when you're building a computer. Remember this, intakes are the bottom and the front. So for us, it would be the bottom and this side right here, and exhaust would be the rear and the top. Hi. All right, so we finished the rough draft of the PC. Obviously, nothing looks good yet. We still have to put everything back together. Moment of truth. Plugging the power in. Flicking the switch. Please work, please work. Where even is this button actually? Oh, I found it. 3, 2, 1. I forgot to plug that fan in. The water's moving. I would say we have a success. Other than me forgetting to plug in that last fan, which I'm gonna go do right now, this is a great first boot. Let's finish this PC. These. All right, so this will just clip in here, the bottom. Boom. We're gonna leave the side glass off, but that is the build complete. Disclaimer, we ran out of F-panel USB headers and ARGB headers. I know I said we chose this motherboard for its plentiful amount of those, but yeah, when you're building an RGB overkill PC, you might run out of RGB headers. Let's turn this thing on, shall we? 3, 2, 1. Lights, cameras, bottom, wait. Where did our fan colors go? So it appears that my great cable management skills has caused this micro USB to come loose. Oh shit. We've got everything up and running. All the fans, actually the colors turned on this time, and don't worry about that broken USB. We did have a replacement fan controller, which worked out great, but man, this build is clean. I'm currently installing all the software needed to run all of these fans, all of these RGB, control everything, as well as install all the updates and drivers to make sure that the PC is performing to its absolute peak condition. So we're gonna do that and then get some benchmarks running. Keep in mind that while this PC is very flashy, we still are just running pretty average specs because we still have that i5 14th gen and we still have an RTX 4060, which by no means are bad specs. They're great, especially in the modern day. They're both brand new, they're the latest generation, but as I boot up Time Spy here, as much as we'd like to expect this to be some overkill, like performance-wise gaming PC, it really is just an overkill RGB PC with some pretty average specs. I'd say a bit above average specs. Got Time Spy running, it's already off to a great start. Let's see how it does. So the test just wrapped up here. We got a score of 10,769, which in all of my years building computers is the best score I've ever gotten. Even with a 4060 and an i5, this PC did put out really good marks. If we convert this to like FPS that you'll see, so everyday usage in your video games you're playing, Battlefield 5 on max settings, 180 plus FPS, Apex Legends, 140 plus, Grand Theft Auto 5, 180 plus, Red Dead Redemption 2, 115 plus, and Fortnite, you'll be getting 260 plus. So yes, really good performance. But is it almost $3,000 worth of performance? With that kind of budget, I'd personally see myself using like an RTX 4080 or a 7800 X3D CPU paired with that, or an Intel i9. But no, we have an i5 and we have a 4060. Now, I want to quickly go over to the temps because that is what really intrigued me, as We have so much like thermal control here. We have 10 fans and a 360 millimeter AIO. If we look at our CPU, I did see that mid-test, but yeah, when it got to the worst part of the test in terms of stress on the CPU, it only went up to 40 degrees Celsius. Keep in mind, the max average you want to see your CPU at is like around 70 to 80 degrees. So we really could put a much more powerful CPU in here and just push the limits of the performance of this whole rig. But even with all that said, is it worth it? So, after spending the most money that I've personally ever spent on a PC, do I think that the hefty price tag of around $2,700 was worth it for this computer with some pretty lights? No, I don't. But if you want to do it yourself, we won't judge much.